I've always hated Mondays. This Monday turned out to be one of my worst. My wife Peggy was very depressed and moody. She prepared breakfast for the boys and me as if she were a robot. She wasn't angry, just depressed. It didn't help brighten up the morning. I had no idea what caused it and didn't feel like asking her. My sons, Robert, 16, and Dave, 18, left for school around the same time I left for work. For the past 15 years, I have worked for a shipping company that loaded and unloaded container ships. It was hard work, but the pay was good. I've always wanted to go to the sea, and this was as close as I could get. My dream was to sail around the world and see different countries and people. It was in my blood, and sometimes I would get depressed just knowing it would never happen. Home and family seemed to be most important. I was happy with my family life. I had 2 wonderful sons and a loving wife whom I adored. Unfortunately, it was Monday. What I hated most about my job were some of the people I worked with. Colin Farrell was the most obnoxious guy in the world, and he always had 3 buddies, Bob Timbers, Ray Collins, and Freddie Springer. The 5 of us went to high school together, and I didn't like them then or now. Hey, Grady, I missed you at the party Saturday night. It seemed like Colin was going to start something early today. There was a corporate party on Saturday evening. The boys and I had to go to Chester to help my dad move out of his house. My mom died 6 months ago, and my dad decided to move to something smaller. Peggy was disappointed, so I told her to go to the party without us. When we got back on Sunday night, I asked her how the party went, and she simply said, "Okay." I just looked at Colin and didn't say anything. "We're sorry you couldn't come, Grady, but thank you for letting your wife come." She made the whole evening worthwhile. I found myself clenching my fists as I listened to his group of hyenas giggling like girls. They seemed to be joking to themselves at my expense. As I started to walk away, Colin followed me and continued his taunts. "She's certainly grown into a beautiful creature since high school, Grady. You are lucky to have this opportunity to come home every evening." I realized that the day was going to be long. The veins in my forehead began to bulge, and I felt the tendons in my neck tighten. All my life, I have had to fight to control my temper. I tried to leave again. I turned to face the group, and Colin threw something to the side. It was red, soft, and it was panties. Peggy forgot them on Saturday. She might need them to go with that red bra she was wearing. The whole group burst out laughing. I stood and looked at them without raising my head. Red silk fell onto the concrete loading dock at my feet. I made no attempt to lift it. I suddenly realized that I had stopped breathing and felt the muscles in my stomach tighten. I turned into a compressed spring of rage, ready to unwind. I could handle any of them without problems, but doing them all at once would be difficult. At this moment, I didn't care. I began to move towards my tormentors when a huge hand grabbed my shoulder. Josh Hamilton, the dock supervisor, looked me in the eyes and simply nodded his head towards the main office. Nothing was said. I looked at the group with a hatred they had never seen before and followed Josh up the stairs. For some reason, they all stopped laughing, and a worried look appeared on their faces. Josh walked into Henry Clark's office, and I sat down opposite Henry's secretary, Sally. "Grady, would you like a cup of coffee?" "No, thanks. I'm too upset to hold a cup right now." I could see Josh and Henry talking through the glass partition. It seemed serious. "Sally, were you at the party on Saturday night?" She simply nodded affirmatively. "Can you tell me what the hell happened?" I have no idea what's going on. Peggy didn't say anything, and I don't know what to do. "I don't have to say anything, Grady. This is something you should discuss with your wife." "You were there, Sally. You saw what happened. Just give me a hint." Sally was rummaging through some papers on her desk, trying to figure out how she could get out of talking to me. "Please, Sally, I need to know." Peggy showed up at the party, dressed stunningly. After about an hour, Colin began pouring drinks into her. She seemed to be having a good time. Colleen whispered something to his group every time her drinks were refilled, and they all laughed. Finally, Peggy and Colin went into the back room. About half an hour later, Bob, Ray, and Freddie came out. We didn't see any of them for an hour, and then they all appeared again, laughing and joking. Peggy smiled, but she looked terrible. Her hair and dress were disheveled. She and Colin left together about 10 minutes later. Thank you, Sally. I didn't want to hear it, but it explains a lot. We sat in silence for another 10 minutes. Josh came out and nodded for me to come in. Grady, I'm not happy about what happened this morning. Colin, Ray, Bob, and Freddie received a week's leave without pay. I want you to take 2 weeks off. Josh told me what happened on Saturday, and I'm guessing this is the first you heard about it. I can't afford to have anyone in the hospital. I don't believe this is all your fault, but I hope you can work it out before you come back. I will do everything in my power to help you get through this. Just ask. Now get out of here. I nodded my thanks to Henry and thanked Sally again as I left the office. Colin and his boys were nowhere around when I headed towards the parking lot. I left my panties on the dock. I didn't go home. I went north in search of a refuge where I could get lost. I had a lot of time to think about the past and present. Peggy and I went to high school together. She was large, fat, scruffy, and not what you would call attractive. She didn't know how to take care of herself or apply makeup. Her hair always looked like crap. She was not a member of any in groups, and in fact, was an outcast from society. Of course, that's what attracted me to her. I was 190 centimeters and weighed about 140 kilograms. I was big, but at the same time, awkward, shy, and not much to look at. I was too awkward to play any sports. Colin Farrell was the complete opposite. He was good-looking, smooth-talking, and athletic. I know it sounds stupid, but there were rumors that the girls were trying to get Colin to take them out so he could eat their cherries. He never had a steady girlfriend, but he never left without a date. I hated this guy. He boasted about his victories, and the girls didn't seem to mind. Everyone except Peggy. Peggy tried to persuade Colin to invite her somewhere. She wanted to be able to say that he was her first. Colin not only refused her, but also told the whole school about it. He said he only had sex with girls and wasn't going to stoop so low as to fuck a pig. The kids at school thought it was a joke, but Peggy was crushed. I saw this as my chance to approach her. Since I had no idea how to woo a girl, I just started being friendly. Pretty soon we became close, and by the time we left school, we were a couple. I was the one who managed to fuck her. After finishing school, I got a job as a laborer at a construction site. After a few years, my flab disappeared, and I was all muscle and tendon. I was strong and coordinated. It was nice to stop being a running joke. Peggy and I got married a year later. Robert and Dave were born very close to each other, and soon after Peggy began working out at the gym next door. The transformation was amazing. Somewhere along the way, she learned how to style her hair, apply the right amount of makeup, and dress to kill. She looked good, and I was proud to have her as my wife. I loved her when she was a frog, and my reward was a princess. When I got the job on the loading dock, our whole life changed for the better, right up until today. The A14 highway turned into A1, and I continued to reduce the number of kilometers. I knew where I was going, and it was just a matter of time. I thought about my 2 sons. They came from a large, powerful family and showed it. We made sure they were both active and that they didn't turn into lumps like we did. Dave was about 5 centimeters taller than Robert and a little thinner. Robert had big hands. They were both in good physical shape and could take care of themselves. We taught them restraint and the importance of not being bullies. They both had the same goal, to go to sea. I think it was in their blood. I promised that I would help them with whatever they wanted to do. Peggy was a good mother and a wonderful wife. She kept a good home and did not spend money on frivolous things. We had a great sex life, or so I thought. We had fun when we had sex, and I was completely happy with that part of our life. I found myself on the M6 motorway, still counting off the kilometers. The shadows grew longer, and I hoped to arrive before dark. Port Patrick was a 7-hour drive, but it was the only place I wanted to be right now. I kept looking for the A75 and finally found it as the sun set. The Duke's Duck had plenty of parking this time of year. I gave the keys to the bartender and asked to make a reservation for a week. I had no luggage, no change of clothes, no razor, but I didn't care. He took the room key off the hook, gave it to me, and hung the car keys in the same place. I took a bottle of beer and sat down in the far corner. A street lamp shone through the amber glass of a bottle above my head. It's time to become numb and forget about everything in the world. I found myself waking up in my room late in the morning. I vaguely remembered how I got there. Usually one of the local regulars would help me up the stairs and lower me onto the bed. I never got under the sheets. I splashed some water on my face and took a couple of showers. I had to put the same clothes back on, so the shower didn't really help considering the smell. I began to grow a ferocious-looking beard. I had never let my facial hair grow, and it was a little annoying to see it in the state I was in. Every couple of days, they checked my credit card to make sure my account was updated. I had been wallowing in self-pity for a long time, and I was starting to get tired of it. I sat there, glassy-eyed, staring at the dartboard for the 1,000th time, when two men in uniform walked in. I watched them without looking at them. They talked to the bartender for a bit, and he nodded in my direction. He also pointed to my keys on the wall behind him. I assumed they were looking for me. I was amazed at my own intelligence. They didn't even try to talk to me. For the next 2 hours, they just poured coffee into me. Grady Baxter, do you think you can talk to us? Did I do something wrong? We just need to talk. Are you ready? Can we go outside? The sun was shining, but everything was wet. The cobblestones on the street in front of the pub were slippery, and I was in no hurry to cross to the causeway. The whole street was downhill, and I was still feeling a little tipsy. The cool air filled my lungs wonderfully. I don't smoke, but the air inside was so thick that the results were the same. I leaned over the granite seawall and vomited. It was mostly liquid because I hadn't eaten much solid food the last few days. My head began to clear, as did my eyes. My two companions waited patiently for me to come to my senses. I was beginning to feel responsible for causing them so much trouble. The bench I was sitting on was wet, but I didn't care. How can I help you, gentlemen? First of all, we were trying to find you because you had been missing for 10 days. Secondly, we are trying to find Colin Farrell and hope that you could help us. Well, you found me, so that part is solved. I haven't seen Colin Farrell since the day I arrived here. I believe the bartender has already informed you that I have not left the hotel since I checked in. I have no idea where Colin is, but I think I'll look for him when I get home. I chatted with them for about another hour. They had nothing to accuse me of, and after they were sure I was safe, they seemed only interested in talking about Colin. They found me thinking my credit card had been charged. I will remember not to make this mistake again if it ever happens again. I walked down the hill and bought some fresh clothes and a toothbrush. I decided I'd keep the beard for a while, even though I thought it looked crap. After taking my last shower, I paid the bill and headed home. I stopped 4 times along the way. Twice I managed to get something to eat, but mostly I was just trying to delay my arrival. Nothing pleasant awaited me at home. I wanted to see my boys, though. She was sitting on the sofa. There was only one light on in the living room. She looked at me with her hands folded in her lap, afraid to move. She seemed to be crying, but in the dim light it was hard to be sure. I went to get a beer, but the thought of it made me feel a little nauseous, so I grabbed a Coke instead. I sat down in the chair opposite her and waited for her to say something. The boys stayed with friends for the night. It was my idea for us to have some free time to talk. Why didn't you tell me about this before I found out? I don't know. I guess I was scared. How? I wasn't sure what you would think or do. I did something stupid, and it came back to haunt me. Did it backfire? What the hell went wrong? You're not going to be mad at me, are you, Grady? I don't know. It would probably be better if you told the truth, but we'll have to wait and see. Grady, do you remember what Colin did to me in high school? Yes. I've wanted to get even with him for this ever since it happened. Saturday night at the party seemed like a good time, so I set a trap for him. Doesn't sound like the story I heard. Listen to me, Grady. Like I said, it backfired on me. I dressed really nicely and Colin started hitting on me. I let him think it worked and he suggested we go back to the closet. We kissed a little because I had to do that to turn him on. After some time, he was playing with my breasts, but without wearing a bra. I took off my panties and waved them in front of his nose to seduce him and make sure he was horny and ready. Why did you do this? What were you thinking? I wanted to get even with him. I wanted to make him pay for humiliating me. Anyway, I noticed the bulge in his pants, so I told him to take them off so we could have some fun. He dropped his pants and underwear, and then I did something girls should never do. Fine. What the hell did you do? I pointed at his instrument and started laughing. I told him that this was a pathetic excuse for manhood and that there was no way I was going to let anybody with such a tiny tool fuck me. As I teased him about his manhood, it began to shrink until there was nothing left but a limp thing. It was disgusting, but appropriate in this case. Continue. I pulled myself together and opened the door to leave. Bob, Ray, and Freddie were waiting outside the door. Apparently, Colin told them they would have a few seconds after he was done with me, and they waited patiently for their turn. I walked past them and, laughing, headed to the ladies' room. When I returned to the party, they were all standing around with big smiles on their faces. Apparently, they told all the other guys at the party that they screwed me in the storage room. They said this to get even with me for humiliating Colin. I got upset and left. I heard that you left with Colin. It is not true. I left alone and went straight home. Did you leave your panties there for Colin? No, I just forgot them when I left. Why didn't you tell me? After they turned everything upside down, I got scared. I didn't know what to tell you. So, you let me figure it out on my own in front of all my workmates. I felt like a fool, a cuckold. They teased me about what was happening and I couldn't even respond because I didn't know anything. I had to find out from the secretary what happened, and her story doesn't quite match yours. She wasn't there. I was. I told you what happened. Damn it, Grady, I'm your wife. You must stand up for me and support me. Peggy began to cry and went into the kitchen. I sat with my cola and watched as she leaned on the plastic table and cried quietly. I loved her more than anything in the world. She was the only girl I ever cared about. She stuffed me with all sorts of nonsense and arranged plumbing work. Peggy had plans to save her marriage. Sally had no reason to lie to me. I felt the urge to start asking Peggy about every inconsistency in her story, but decided not to. I couldn't change what happened, and forcing Peggy to admit to something she didn't want wouldn't have accomplished anything. I really wanted to know the truth, but I wasn't going to push it from her. I decided that I would leave things as they were and let her relax. Group of people came down the alley. No one chased me as I calmly walked to my car and drove away. 2 hours later, I was sitting in the police station. Peggy had just put the house on the market to get a deposit and was finishing up the paperwork. Alice Springer burst in, screaming that she wanted me locked up forever. They were able to keep her away from me, but she wouldn't shut up until Peggy talked to her. I don't know what Peggy said, but Alice looked at us both like we were dirt and walked away. Robert and Dave took my car and drove me home, and Peggy followed them. The boys seemed proud of me, but I was careful not to say or do anything to encourage them. Freddie had a dislocated shoulder, a broken nose, 2 black eyes, and multiple internal injuries that they had not yet fully identified. My wife and I didn't talk about the problem when we got home. For the first time in 20 years, I slept on the couch, but I didn't mind. The next morning, I got up early trying to figure out what to do next. The Osaka Maru was unloading at Felixstowe. The captain, Jose Costa, was a pleasant man and was willing to take me on board when and if I received my papers. I promised to call him back later this week. On the way home, I stopped to add gas to the tank. As soon as I finished, I noticed someone rushing towards me. I turned around just as Ray Collins hit me on the left side with a 2x4. The tree bounced off my left hand before breaking a couple of ribs. I squinted and doubled over in pain. I remember trying to breathe, but I couldn't. With my eyes closed, I saw bright white flashes and then felt my knees buckle. The wooden club made a funny clanging sound as it bounced on the asphalt. Ray was unable to hold her after the blow. My right hand shot forward as I fell and grabbed some flannel. I was able to spin to the left when I slammed my right flannel fist into the ground. I felt myself land hard on Ray's body. My eyes were still squeezed shut, trying to drown out the pain in my left side. I couldn't move my left arm. I acted on instinct as my right arm began to flail up and down. I don't know what I hit, but as long as it wasn't asphalt, everything was fine. Both sides of my body worked independently of each other. While my left side clenched for protection, my right side attacked everything it could find. At first, Ray squirmed under me, trying to free himself, but after a few seconds, he was motionless. I didn't stop hitting him until some clients pulled me away. I still couldn't get a good breath of air, and it hurt like hell. One of the doctors gave me an injection, and I slept the whole way to the hospital. I woke up a few hours later with a bandage on my left arm and my body tightly taped. I was able to breathe, but with caution. Peggy was there and didn't look happy. "Damn it, Grady, what do you think you're doing? You're making a hell of a fuss about this little problem at the party." "Sorry, honey, I did not do anything. Why did your boyfriend attack me with a baton? And what do you mean by a little trouble at the party? Either I will get a better explanation of what happened that Saturday, or I will continue to talk to people." "You're not talking. You hunt them down and beat them up." I smiled broadly at her. "Why would I want to do something like that? Stop acting like a bully and stop calling them my boyfriends." Peggy walked out the door just as the doctor entered. I was more bruised than broken. Ray swung that tree around like a little boy. My arm just hurt, and the cracks in my ribs were superficial. I only had pain and breathing problems from the fall. Early the next morning, Robert and Dave came and picked me up. They were grinning from ear to ear, and I told them to stop it. Ray, on the other hand, was in bad shape. He will eat through a straw for about a month until his jaw heals, and it will be at least a week until the swelling on his face goes down. Of course, all the hits were accidental, because at that moment, I had no idea why I was hitting. No charges were brought against me because several people testified that Ray attacked me first. I had to call into work and take another week off, this time due to illness. I spoke to Sally for a bit, and she told me that Bob Timbers had quit his job and his last paycheck had been sent to his brother's house in Aberdeen. They still had no idea where Colin was. Peggy and I didn't communicate very well. Now I sleep on the couch every night. I was able to remove the bandage from my arm fairly quickly, but my ribs were still a little sore. At least I could move and breathe normally. The Osaka Maru sailed in 4 days. I stopped by to see my lawyer. The divorce papers were ready, so I told him to file them in 4 days. I left everything to Peggy. She would get the house, but the bail company would take it if I didn't post the deposit. I wouldn't care. I included a copy of the vasectomy report and a recent sperm count lab report with the divorce papers. I made a few phone calls to friends in Scotland and spent some time in the gym trying to recover from the effects of the beatong. Henry Clark was not happy about my departure and agreed to keep my departure a secret for as long as he could. I asked him to look after my boys if necessary. Peggy stopped going to the gym and the house was in chaos. The laundry was slowing down and the overall appearance of the entire establishment was going downhill. The food was hastily prepared and the conversation was not very lively. I swear it looked like she had gained weight again. The whole world went to hell in 4 weeks. The next day the boys handed me my set of maritime papers. I have never seen them so happy. All 3 of us were ready to go. I told them to wait and finish this school year before making any decisions. I don't think they listened to me. I returned to Osaka Maru and took care of everything I needed to do. The quartermaster gave me a list of things that I had to take before leaving the next morning. I gathered my gear and checked into my cabin on board before leaving the ship for the last time. Robert left his Triumph Bonneville 750 parked at the end of the dock. Within minutes, I was on my way to Aberdeen. An 8-hour motorcycle ride is not a pleasant pleasure. The Triumph was shaking so violently that it was impossible to read the odometer. The engine ran smoothly, the weather held, but I was still glad when I arrived. My friends found Bob Timbers and planned to invite him to the 4 Crowns. The men's restroom in this establishment was located in the back, and to get to it, you had to leave the building. I walked in and looked around just long enough to let my buddies know I had arrived. Then I walked to the side of the building and waited. The first 2 guys were local, but then Bob came out. I heard the door close behind him as he headed to the toilet. I grabbed his right arm like Freddy and pressed his head against the stone wall of the building as I walked down the alley. As I walked, his entire face was scratched by the stone, and he tripped. I walked about 15 meters and threw him against the wall. He half moaned and half cried in pain. "Don't kill me, Grady. Please do not kill me." "I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I had no intention of killing him, but I decided there was no point in telling him about it. I'll give you a choice, Bob. Tell me the truth about everything that happened at the party, and I will let you live. Lie to me, and you will die." "Good, good. I'm really hurt, Grady. Speak, damn it, and I'll call you a doctor." "When Peggy came to the party without you, Colin was delighted. He started bragging about how he was going to pump her up and then fuck her. She looked really good, Grady, honestly. She was dressed up and looked like she wanted to have fun. Colin started loading her up with drinks and told us we could fuck her. I just wanted to let you know that Robert and Dave Baxter are not on board the Tanaka Maru bound for Cape Town." We both smiled. I always wanted to be a sailor. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.